The silence inside that mansion wasn't peaceful. It was poisonous, the kind of quiet that screams something has already shattered, and the moment the words Yacht Days exploded onto the airwaves, the fairy tale didn't just crack, it bled. This story isn't about love anymore. It's about exposure. It's about secrets that refuse to stay buried. And it's about a prince who may have finally realized he married into a past that doesn't match the story he was sold. Because the second those old photos resurfaced, nothing was the same. One moment, the world was watching a carefully polished image, the self-made woman, the misunderstood duchess, the victim of relentless cruelty. And then, with one cold smirk and a screen full of grainy images, that image was dragged into the harsh, unforgiving spotlight. Sun-soaked decks, crystal glasses clinking, private jets, super yachts slicing through Mediterranean waters. And a single question hanging in the air like smoke after a gunshot: who was paying for this life? The studio lights burned hot as the accusation landed. Not shouted, not hysterical, but surgical. A calm, methodical dismantling of a narrative that had been repeated for years. The struggling actress story, the humble beginnings, the paycheck-to-paycheck grind, all of it suddenly felt thin, too thin. Because the math didn't math. A mid-tier cable actress income didn't explain five-star islands, elite parties, and luxury travel that even A-listers flinch at. And once that gap was exposed, the whispers turned feral. Not gossip anymore. Investigation. Receipts. Timelines. Names half hidden, half hinted. Sponsors. Patrons. Powerful men who never appeared in the spotlight but seemed to open every door. And that's when the word that would haunt everything came back from the dead. Yachts. Not as a joke, not as an insult, but as a symbol. A floating world where money erases questions and discretion is the currency. Suddenly, those blurry images weren't just old memories. They were evidence, or at least enough to make people stop believing the story they'd been fed. And while the internet combusted, something far more dangerous was happening behind closed doors. Because inside that mansion, this wasn't about headlines. It was about trust. Sources whispered that the mood shifted instantly. Not anger first, shock, a deep, hollow disbelief. The kind that comes when you realize the person next to you might not be who you thought they were. The kind that makes every old conversation replay in your head with a new, darker meaning. Had he known? That question alone is said to have detonated everything. Because defending your partner against lies is one thing. Defending them against patterns is another. Lawyers were activated fast. Too fast. Statements slammed into the press with military precision. Words like smear, fabrication, malicious. But instead of calming the storm, it fed it. The denials felt frantic, defensive, loud in a way that didn't reassure, it alarmed. And then came the voices from the past. Not enemies, not tabloids. People who once stood close, people who once paid. People who once believed they were helping a dream, only to wake up years later realizing they might have been financing a lifestyle instead. Stories started lining up like dominoes. The trips that were supposed to be career investments, the favors framed as temporary help, the promises that dissolved the moment a bigger door opened, and the most chilling part? The silence afterward. Calls not returned, messages unanswered. A clean cut once the ladder had been climbed. That's when this stopped being a media feud and started feeling like an unmasking. Inside the marriage, the pressure reportedly became unbearable. Raised voices. Long, icy gaps of silence. Questions with no satisfying answers. Names from the past surfacing that had never been mentioned before. And the one question no one wants to ask their spouse, but once it's there, it never leaves. Was I just another step? Because if the allegations were even partially true, then the implications were devastating. It wouldn't just mean embellishment. It would mean strategy. A life built not on coincidence, but calculation. Relationships as currency. Charm as leverage. And for someone who already sacrificed family, homeland, and identity in the name of love, that realization would hit like betrayal on an atomic level. Then came the moment the world couldn't ignore. A public event that should have been united. Symbolic. Strong. He arrived alone. No hand to hold. No reassuring glance. No silent solidarity. Just a prince standing under flashbulbs that suddenly felt hostile instead of familiar. His face tight, his eyes tired, and his silence louder than any statement ever released. Absence speaks, and her absence screamed. No supportive message, no appearance, no shared front, just withdrawal, retreat. A vacuum where confidence used to be. And in that vacuum, the rumors metastasized. People began asking the unthinkable out loud. Is he done protecting her? Is this the beginning of the end? Did the bombshell finally crack something that couldn't be repaired? Because this wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about the future, about credibility, about charities, about everything they built after burning bridges behind them. And perhaps the most brutal realization of all, you can survive lies. You can even survive scandal. But you can't survive discovering that the foundation of your relationship might have been engineered long before you ever stepped into the picture. The world is watching now, not with sympathy, but suspicion. Not asking if more will come out, but who will speak next. And somewhere behind those gates, a marriage that once branded itself as unbreakable is reportedly holding together by threads made of denial, fear, and unanswered questions. This story is far from over. The night didn't cool the tension, it sharpened it. Because once the doors closed and the cameras disappeared, there was nowhere left to hide from the questions that had already taken root. The whispers say the arguments didn't explode right away. No screaming, no smashed furniture, just something colder, a forensic kind of interrogation. The type where every answer spawns two more doubts. Names were allegedly mentioned, dates questioned, trips revisited, and with every vague explanation, the air inside that house grew heavier, like oxygen itself was running out. This wasn't about public image anymore. This was about who knew what and when. And the most devastating realization creeping into the room was this. Some stories had never been told, not because they were forgotten, but because they were dangerous. Friends noticed it first. Phone calls going unanswered, meetings postponed, invitations declined. The once inseparable duo suddenly operating on separate orbits. He appeared quieter, more withdrawn. She, according to murmurs, oscillated between defiant confidence and icy withdrawal, refusing to acknowledge that the narrative she controlled for years was now spiraling beyond her grip. Then the leaks began to shift tone. No longer just about luxury trips or blurry yacht photos. Now it was about patterns, about how often powerful men appeared around her during the same windows she supposedly had no money, about favors framed as mentorships, about investments that never yielded anything except access. And the word that kept surfacing, whispered like a curse? Transactional. Supporters tried to shut it down, dismiss it as misogyny, a coordinated takedown, a punishment for daring to rise. But even among defenders, doubt crept in quietly. Because defending someone is easy when the story is clean. It's much harder when timelines start aligning too perfectly to ignore. Behind the scenes, insiders claim legal teams were no longer just preparing defenses, they were bracing for impact. Because once former allies start talking, the story stops being theoretical. It becomes human, emotional, messy. And that's exactly what happened. Another voice from the past allegedly surfaced, not loud, not dramatic, but calm, almost regretful. Someone who didn't want revenge, just closure. Someone who claimed they weren't trying to destroy anyone, just explain why they felt used. The reaction was instant and brutal. Silence. No counters, no fiery denials, just a vacuum. And in gossip culture, silence is gasoline, speculation turned savage. People began dissecting every old interview, every speech about empowerment, every tearful confession, rewatching them through a new lens. Not with empathy, with suspicion, asking whether vulnerability had been genuine or weaponized. The pressure on the marriage reportedly reached a breaking point around this time. Insiders describe conversations that ended with doors quietly closing, nights spent in separate rooms. A growing emotional distance that no public statement could repair. And the most damning detail? He allegedly stopped defending her, at least privately, not because he suddenly believed every accusation, but because the certainty he once had was gone. And when certainty dies, Lev doesn't die instantly, it hesitates, it questions, it pulls back. Public appearances reflected it. No spontaneous smiles, no protective gestures, no reassuring glances, just stiffness, distance. A choreography that felt rehearsed rather than instinctive. Meanwhile, her strategy reportedly shifted from confrontation to retreat, from visibility to absence, from commanding the narrative to waiting it out. But waiting doesn't work when the internet smells blood. Screenshots circulated, old posts resurfaced, former acquaintances reevaluated. Everyone became an amateur investigator, stitching together fragments of a life that suddenly looked less like a fairy tale and more like a carefully edited highlight reel. And then came the moment that rattled even loyal observers. A charity connection paused. Not canceled, paused. Officially unrelated, unofficially, a red flag so loud it didn't need explanation. Because when organizations start distancing themselves quietly, it's not about guilt, it's about risk. And risk was now everywhere. The whispers turned darker. Not about crimes, not about illegal acts, but about character, about ethics, about whether ambition had crossed a line so early and so often that it became second nature. Inside that house, the emotional toll reportedly became impossible to ignore. The man who once burned bridges for love now faced the haunting possibility that he'd burned them for a version of someone that never truly existed. And that realization is lethal to any relationship, because it doesn't just hurt, it rewrites your entire memory of the past. Every romantic gesture becomes questionable. Every origin story suspect. Every chance meeting suddenly feels planned. Was it destiny or design? Friends allegedly urged him to step back, to slow down, to stop fighting a war that might not be his to fight anymore. And for the first time, it seems he listened, not publicly, not dramatically, but emotionally. The distance grew, the silence stretched, and the absence of joint appearances spoke louder than any divorce filing ever could. She, on the other hand, was said to feel cornered, betrayed by the very tools that once elevated her: visibility, attention, narrative control. Because when you build power through perception, losing control of perception is catastrophic. The world now waits in that uncomfortable pause before truth lands, not knowing if the next reveal will be another voice from the past or a quiet announcement from the present, not knowing whether the story ends with reconciliation, separation, or something far messier. But one thing feels undeniable now. The fairy tale isn't just cracked, it's under investigation. And the most dangerous thing about investigations? They don't care how much you once loved the story, only whether it was real. Because in the end, this was never just about yachts, or photos, or whispered favors. It was about trust. And trust, once poisoned, doesn't shatter loudly. It erodes, silently, until one day, there's nothing left to stand on.